Hi everyone, good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you. A small old car was dashing through the streets and intersections of the capital, splashing the autumn puddles. Behind the wheel was a pretty young girl of about 25, wearing the trademark jacket and cap of Maestro's Pizzeria. Allison worked as a delivery girl, delivering orders to customers for the entire shift, receiving requests from the dispatcher. Since childhood, the girl adored cars, and the work itself was to her liking, for the wheel in the road. A vacation for her, but the boss, Neil Morrison, was unbearable. That fat, flabby, foul-smelling old man disliked the girl at once, and had deliberately given her the worst, oldest car, which broke down and malfunctioned every day. The mechanic with golden hands in the garage pizza was available and got a good salary. But that car repairs Allison had to own. So decided the boss. It was a flagrant violation on his part, and everyone knew about it, but no one rushed to complain. The girl was afraid of being out of work altogether, so she endured the hardships with clenched teeth. Allison didn't give up and spent the whole weekend under the hood of the old car. She and her mechanic helped her out a little, and in the end, together, they brought it to a decent condition. Just now, driving away from another customer's house, the car started jerking and kicking, and at the next light it stalled. Allison cursed to herself and opened the hood. After a half hour of poking around, she deftly changed the plugs, and the car was running again. The woman wiped her hands with a damp napkin, poured coffee from a thermos, and leaned back in the seat. She tiredly covered her eyes and remembered her little son and became sad. How was her little boy? Misses her madly, waiting for her to come, to hug and kiss her. How it is unbearable to part with their own blood. No matter what she does, her heart skips a beat. Her childhood and adolescent years, her first mad passion and love, flashed before her eyes like the pages of a scribbled book. Allison's childhood was fun and happy. She grew up in a small village 100 kilometers from the capital. Dad worked as a carpenter in a small shop. Mom worked as a cook in a kindergarten. An ordinary family, just like everybody else. Despite the fact that their parents always had a hard time about money, they did not lose optimism and coped as best they could. There were no scandals or swearing in the family. Parents respected each other. The father apparently wanted a son very much. So when Allison was born, he was even a little upset. But then he decided that nothing prevented him from introducing his daughter to her father's hobby. He was the one who taught Allison to drive their old car, and from the very childhood they had been rummaging together under the hood, enthusiastically working on details of the car. Mom cursed jokingly and grumbled as she washed the dirty child in the evening. "Robert, what are you doing? He's growing up to be a girl. It's not a nice thing for a girl to spin a wheelbarrow. Let her learn to sew and make soup." But the father was only joking, winking at his scruffy daughter. "You don't understand a thing, Francis. I can see how much she likes it. Her eye is on fire. Let her do the work. She'll need it in life. It's easy to make soup, but it takes brains and wit to rebuild a carburetor. That's no joke." So by the time she was 18, Allison could drive an entire car with her eyes closed, got her license, and was racing around in a friend's car, competing to see who could drive it the hardest. She was a very attractive-looking girl, small in stature with a fine, chiseled figure and an upturned nose. Since she shared the boys' hobbies, they considered her a friend and a lad, not abused, respected, and even consulted sometimes on repairs. It was worse with her friends. Allison was unbearably bored, listening to endless talk about eyelashes, face masks, and new fancy rags. But she could list all the brands of cars and their parts with closed eyes. She liked ripped jeans, tracksuits, and always had her hair tied in a bun on top of her head. One day, a new guy came into their company. His name was Matthew. He was visiting relatives for the summer. When their eyes met, Allison was lost at once. She fell in love immediately, instantly. It was some inexplicable chemistry, a bolt of lightning, an extraordinary miracle. Matthew seemed stunningly handsome, almost 2 meters tall, pumped, athletic, with black as night, brown eyes and dark brown hair. He marveled at Allison. Come on, can't that pretty princess drive and repair cars? I find that hard to believe. Well, I could have sworn she couldn't beat me. I was in a race last year, so Allison, not expecting herself, challenged him. Let's make a bet. Tonight, we'll have a race on the takeoff. Whoever gets there first and fastest wins. The loser gets whatever the winner wants, okay? The guy stared at her with interest. Wow, brave you are. Come on if you're so eager to lose. Get ready to fulfill, like a goldfish, my wish. In the evening, all the friends gathered at an abandoned airstrip near the village. They set the chips at the start and finish, checked the condition of the cars they would be driving. The young people were in anticipation of something new. It was not every day that races were held in these parts, even improvised ones. 2 of the girls stood with flags and prepared to give the go. Head, and the boys were on hand with a stopwatch to measure the time. Allison exhaled, concentrated, and with a wave of the flag sped off at the same time as Matthew. The road was dusty and bumpy, and she pushed the gas as hard as she could, remembering to maneuver between the potholes and potholes. But no matter how hard she tried, Matthew beat her by a fraction of a second. The youth applauded, congratulating Boy, and many shouted, "What about the wish, Matthew? What did you wish for?" The guy looked at the girl soulfully and said, "Are you ready to fulfill my deepest wish right now?" Allison nodded her head vigorously. "A deal is a deal. You can't break it. Well, tell me, what did you wish for?" Matthew suddenly turned Allison sharply toward him, and then he grabbed her in his arms and kissed her passionately. It was so sudden and skillful, so pleasant and shocking, that the girl responded to his kiss. The whole world inwardly turned upside down, and the stars swam before her eyes. Everyone immediately whistled and applauded. The guy smiled and said loudly, in front of everyone, "I want that brave princess I just kissed to be my bride." The girl blushed and shushed. She was very pleased that Matthew could say in front of everyone that now she was just his girlfriend. So their feelings were mutual. The couple started dating. They were both hot-tempered, jealous, and the romance was a tempestuous affair. It was the way Allison looked at someone else, or it seemed to her that Matthew was paying too much attention to another girl. But the reconciliation was no less heated. They were literally drowning in an ocean of passion, so strong were the emotions. Allison's parents were unhappy with their daughter's choice, and her mother tried to get through to her. "Daughter, I know you're in love, but think about it, Matthew's a stranger. He's a guest here himself. He'll go home in the fall, so what? You'll be alone with a broken heart." The girl suddenly cried, "Mommy, I love him so much I can't help it. I think I'm pregnant. I feel sick all the time and sleepy. I took a test and I got 2 lines. I didn't know it could happen so fast. I'm so scared. I'm afraid that if I tell Matthew about this, he'll leave me. What am I going to do? Daddy's going to fight a lot now, isn't he?" The woman began to comfort her daughter, but the father, overhearing the conversation, did the smart thing instead of shouting and scandalizing. He found Matthew, who was just helping his relatives, pulled him aside, and said quietly, "Hello there, son-in-law. Allison's pregnant. She's sitting there crying, afraid to tell you. Did you get it? Congratulations." The guy's face changed and he went pale. I don't know how it happened. Father clenched his fists. But I know if you try to go away quietly and leave my daughter and make a fool of herself, I'll find her and I'll put her in jail. Is that clear? He's only 18 in a month. It's too late for that now. We're going to have a wedding. Invite your parents over and we'll talk it over. We'll make sure everything's normal. Do you understand me?" The boy nodded his head, but it was obvious he wasn't at all happy about the news. He wasn't planning on becoming a father and a husband in his 20s when he had his whole life ahead of him. Allison was an interesting, pretty girl, of course, but to live with her all her life. Matthew vividly imagined her getting fat after childbirth, getting fatter, the baby screaming and preventing her from getting enough sleep. She'd have to go to a job she hated. Not a good prospect. That same evening, Allison, sniffling her nose, admitted to her fiancé that she was pregnant. He only grumbled irritably. "Yes, I know. Your father came to tell me the good news. He said we were getting married." The girl looked into his eyes. "Don't you want to? It's our baby, isn't it?" "Well, yes, it's a little early. I agree. But it's not all my fault. You're the first man I've ever had." "You're the first man I've ever had. How did I know?" Matthew, trying to disguise his irritation, replied, "Yes, I do. Don't whine. What a mess we're in. I already called my parents. They're coming tomorrow. I imagined my mother would break my neck. The boy's parents, of course, were against marrying their son at such an early age. But the threat of a scandal tipped the scales, and with a squeak they agreed. A month later, the couple were married in a modest wedding. The groom sat gloomier than a cloud, and the bride vomited the whole evening. The newlyweds moved in with Matthew in the next town over. His parents had a 3-room apartment. From the beginning, her mother-in-law had disliked her pregnant daughter-in-law, and she had shown him that she wasn't happy about the union. Allison tried to please everyone at first. She spent days at the stove cleaning, despite the terrible toxemia, hoping, at least in this way, to make family life. But she never got any praise or good treatment. After the baby was born, Matthew got cocky. He wouldn't even hold Andy in his arms or take him for walks, because it was not a man's job. The baby was tearing up at night, his tummy was hurting, and he was teething. Allison stayed up all day, got gaunt, and looked like a zombie. But instead of help, all she got was reprimands. Her husband was irritated and told her off. "What kind of mother are you? Why is he always yelling? It makes my ears pop. You've got to stop him sometime. Make him shut up. It's unbearable." Then an angry mother-in-law came into their room. "It's 3:00 in the morning. You have a conscience. Can't you calm the child down?" Allison sometimes couldn't stand it and snapped. "It's not just my child. It's your son's too. He could have gotten up and helped. I'm going to fall asleep soon enough." The mother-in-law got excited. "What did you think? It's not like being in bed, you know. It's okay, nobody helped us in our time. We did it all by ourselves. Matthew's not getting enough sleep as it is, and he's got one last crucial session coming up." And such confrontations were almost daily. The passion and spice between the young men had long since faded, and instead, aggression and irritation were building up. Allison's parents often visited their daughter and grandchild, bringing food and some money, helping as much as they could. The young mother reassured herself. "It's okay. It's hard at first. When Andy grows up, he'll sleep well. There'll be less to worry about. And Matthew and I will be all right." But my son was growing up. Allison was still running around like a squirrel in a wheel, and Matthew wasn't going to change. On the contrary, he was going out. He could come home at 3 in the morning, drunk with lipstick on his cheek, or not come home at all. The poor wife was crying, cutting off the phone, looking for her husband at his cronies and persuading him to go home. And my mother-in-law also added fuel to the fire. "Do you even look at yourself in the mirror? Who do you look like now? You're an untidy, tortured woman with a poker face. That's why your son runs away from you, won't go home. It's all your fault." Allison couldn't stand it anymore. "You'd better lecture your son because he still behaves like a teenager and not like a husband and father." It wasn't me who was nagging. I'm sick of everything. I'm fed up. My mother-in-law seemed to be just waiting for that, and she immediately threw it away. No one's keeping you here by force. Look at the cheeky girl screaming. She's living off the shelf. We're putting on shoes and clothes, and she's not happy about it. You should be grateful that we brought you into our family. If it weren't for you in your belly, maybe my son would have had a different life. Such girls were looking at him. He went to visit his aunt on his own head. That was the last straw that broke Allison's patience. She simply had a breakdown and hysteria. She began frantically packing her and her son's belongings into a suitcase. There was no point in waiting for her husband. Allison knew he would arrive in the morning, so she only left him a note. We're getting a divorce. I can't take it anymore. You don't need me and my son. Already at the door, her mother-in-law hissed after her. Where are you going? To complain to your mother? No, for good. Your son and I are getting a divorce. I can't take it anymore. My mother-in-law squealed, Ah, so go away, and you know you don't even have to ask to go back. You hillbilly will find Matthew a proper bride, not like you. All the way there, Allison cried and didn't know how to tell her parents about her decision, and that she and Andy were going to stay with them for good. She was afraid of her dad's reaction because he was a traditionalist, saying that if a family, then it would be for life and nothing else. But Allison couldn't imagine in her wildest dreams that this hell could last her whole life. No, she had had enough. She had had enough. The train arrived late at night, and it was 12 o'clock by the time they got there. Allison, exhausted from the long journey, held her suitcase in one hand and her sleepy son in the other, and knocked on the window of her house with the last of her strength. Irma, the yard dog, smelling her mistress, immediately began to whine happily in the yard. The worried father came out on the porch and shouted menacingly, Who's there at this late hour? Peter, if it's you, I'm not giving you money for a bottle. Do you hear me? Allison shouted frightenedly, It's me, Daddy. Open up. The dumbfounded man ran out right away. His daughter was standing on the doorstep. My God, she had lost so much weight this year. She looked like a teenager. She had tears in her eyes. Sleepy Andy was whimpering and cranky. Very sleepy. The man looked at the weighty, heavy suitcase and understood everything at once without words. His daughter did not just come to visit. But when he saw her condition, he did not reproach her, just hugged her tightly, as he had done in his childhood, and said, Well, what are you standing there for? Let's go home. Come on, granddaughter, how I missed you. Allison exhaled and answered quietly, Daddy, Mommy, how I love you. It's so good to be home. The first thing we did was put Andy to bed, and he fell asleep right away. And Allison sat in the kitchen with Mommy for a long time, talking and mourning the ruins of her family life. Mommy didn't scold, didn't yell, just reassured. Never mind, my dear, we'll live without that rascal. We're not the first, nor will we be the last. Anything can happen in life. The neighbors will talk, and then they'll stop. So what now? Maybe things will get better. That's the way it is with men. You'll get over it, grow up, and come back. And you'll get over it. Allison only sobbed. I don't think so, Mom. He doesn't even get up to see his son at night. It's like Andy's a stranger to him. And I don't want to live with my mother-in-law one more day. She didn't even hug her grandson goodbye or say a kind word to him. That night at home on her favorite featherbed, Allison slept as sweetly as ever. She woke up only when the sun was burning through the window, caressing her rays. She rushed to her son's bed, but he wasn't there. Frightened, Allison ran outside in her nightgown. Her mother was weeding the garden, and her father and Andy were feeding the rabbits. The little boy was shoving hay to them and laughing as he watched them crunch merrily. The young mother exhaled and stretched herself sweetly for the first time, and smiled at the sunshine. She couldn't remember when she had slept so much. From that day on, Allison began to live at home with her son. She tried not to sit on her own. Even though work was tight in the village, and she actively helped her mother in the garden and in the kitchen, and she still saw how hard it was for her parents to pull them all through their retirement. They had divorced Matthew. Allison had gone to court, and now her deadbeat dad was paying her alimony. But it was a pittance, since he had no steady income. Matthew had no desire at all to see his son, and he never came to see him. Apparently, indeed, too early a marriage had become a burden on the boy. A year later, Allison came to the capital to earn money to buy new clothes for her son and toys. That's how she got a job as a delivery boy at Maestro's Pizzeria. She rented inexpensive accommodations, struggled, saved on everything, but a couple of times a month she went to see her son and brought money for him. She missed him terribly. The baby also lacked a mother. She literally forcefully pulled him away when it was necessary to go back. The woman dreamed that when the baby grew up, she would take him to her, but now with such a frantic and unpredictable schedule, it was simply impossible. One evening, the dispatcher issued an urgent order to the other end of the neighborhood. There was not much to go on when suddenly a young guy jumped out of an alley right onto the hood of her car. He put his bloody hands out in front and begged her to stop. Allison hit the brakes automatically and, with the window down, screamed in shock. "Are you crazy? What if I ran you over? What happened?" The stranger began to ask confusedly. "Girl, they're chasing me. I have to go to the hospital. I think I've got a vein. It's bleeding all over the place. The cut is too deep. Help me, please." The woman felt unbearably sorry for the poor man. She saw that he was dressed too poorly, in old threadbare jeans and stumbling sneakers of indeterminate color and a dirty hooded sweatshirt. Allison knew that a man's life was at stake, and she was determined to help. She knew she was going to get in trouble for not getting her order in on time, too. Still, she waved him off. "Get in. Let's go." After walking a couple of blocks, our heroine stopped in the parking lot and pulled out a tourniquet from the first aid kit. Pulling it down on the stranger's arm, she inquired, "What's your name?" The guy barely audibly replied, "I'm David. I just got out of jail. Nowhere to go. And today some bullies attacked me, beat me up, cut my hands up. It's just bad luck." The woman almost dropped the bandage in shock. She had a convict in the cabin. She was even instantly hot, she clarified. "What was he in prison for? I hope it wasn't murder." David was embarrassed. He realized that Allison was simply afraid of him, and he hastened to reassure her. "No, that's not it. That's different. But it's a long story, because if I say I'm not guilty of anything, you wouldn't believe me anyway, would you? I can tell you one thing. Prison is a scary place. Just hell. I don't know how I could stand it all and still be a human being. Even the strongest people break down there." Allison just shook her head and drove the injured boy to the hospital. "That's it, goodbye. Get well." David almost cried and responded heatedly. "Thank you. Sweet, kind fairy. I'll find you and thank you. Don't doubt it." When Allison returned to the pizzeria after the delivery, of course, she expected to get in trouble, but she didn't expect such a scandal. Neil Morrison was already waiting for her, and from the threshold he pounced like a madman. "Where have you been all this time, you bum? Why aren't you working?" Allison was even taken aback by such insults and began to explain everything as it was. The owner jumped up and down in anger. "Oh, you're shameless. You're taking bums for a ride in my car, too. I don't want you to stink up the whole cabin. Get out, you're fired. I never want to see you again. I'll find 1,000 more like you. You snot-nosed snot-nose." Allison felt so hurt that she was being thrown out like a dog for nothing, and she shouted in anger, "Well, I'll go. Fuck you." The woman was sobbing as she took her personal belongings out of the garage. The mechanic and other drivers comforted her as best they could. "What a bastard. He kicked me out for nothing, in fact for nothing. So what if I didn't do one thing? That's what happens in life. You did the right thing, Allison. Well, maybe you'll find a better job. Okay, bye. Good luck. We're gonna miss you." They hugged each other in a friendly way and said goodbye. The woman staggered back to her rented room. She felt so bad and disgusted, so hurt. After all, she had put all her heart and hands into her car. She had made a sweet thing out of it. She had tried, and it was just thrown away like an old, unwanted shoe. What to do next and how to live, she had no idea at all. She needed to send money for Andy and her parents, pay the rent soon, and buy something to eat. And she'd given most of the money to that tramp. Allison was depressed, apathetic, and didn't want to get up or move at all. 2 weeks passed. The woman was already desperate. Every day she was calling a bunch of vacancies looking for work, and everywhere was a fiasco. Suddenly there was a persistent knock on the door of her room. The woman staggered to open the door, thinking frightenedly, "I'm screwed. The landlady must be here to evict me because I'm already overdue." But to her surprise, a respectable, well-dressed, young, attractive man was standing on the doorstep, holding the most beautiful bouquet of her favorite gladioluses. He smiled and said hello. "Hello. It's me, David, you know. Here, I came to thank you." "Oh, thank you. You saved my life. Otherwise I would have bled to death." Dazed, Allison could not believe her eyes. The difference between the tramp she was giving a ride to and this solid guy was so colossal. The woman invited him in, poured him a cup of hot tea, and began to ask him questions. "Wow, David, you look amazing. How is that possible? You won millions in the lottery?" The guy laughed and began his story. "Just so you understand, I'll start with my childhood. I'm actually the son of a rich businessman, Walker. My father owned a chain of hotels, and not just in our town. My mother died early. I was only 13. She had a serious illness, and no amount of money in the world could help her, although she was treated by the best medical luminaries. I grieve for my mother very much. I still miss her because she was the closest and dearest person to me. And a year later, my father brought my stepmother, Jacqueline, into the house. From that day on, my quiet life was over forever. She didn't even hide the fact that she didn't like me. We often had conflicts. She had a son of her own, Harry, and he, of course, moved in with us, too. Who do you think she loved more? In front of her father, she pretended to care and exuded love. And when he was gone, it was only Harry who got everything. Stepbrother was a piece of work, didn't want to study, skipped classes and blew his dad's money in clubs. I graduated high school, went to university, and studied business and law. Despite the conflicts and clashes with my stepmother, those student years seemed to me to be the happiest ones. I had a lot of friends. Learning was surprisingly easy and interesting. When before graduation was only a couple of months, my father died suddenly and mysteriously in a car accident. He was driving in the evening after a meeting with partners from a neighboring town, and suddenly, on an absolutely deserted highway, a dump truck hit him. Where it came from, it's just incomprehensible. My father died on the spot without regaining consciousness, and the driver of the truck was never found, despite the search. This grief finally knocked me down. I don't even remember the funeral. I was heavily sedated and depressed. Dad did not leave a will, so all of his property went to me and my stepmother as the lawful spouse. I knew right away that this sneaky snake was to blame for all these tragedies when one day the police found drugs in my jacket pocket. Apparently Harry, at his mother's behest, did his best. I know for a fact he dabbled in them. He even showed me a couple of rolls like that once. That's how I got my sentence, even though I swear I'd never even tried cigarettes in my life. There was no use proving it because Jacqueline had tried and bought everyone she could. There was no one to stand up for me. There was no free lawyer, and I went to jail for 8 years. At first, I thought I would go crazy or die in that colony. For me, a homeboy who had grown up in luxury, those foul-smelling cells, the walls covered with damp and mold, and the disgusting balderdash, which could not be called food, seemed like some unreal nightmare. At first, they even tried to strangle me at night. The only thing that saved me was the fact that I had excellent physical training and somehow managed to fight back. Apathy went away at once. Then I was so angry and decided to survive despite them all. I began to train, because before prison, I was a serious boxer, and I worked like a black man to the sweat, and gave the brigade a plan for 10 men. So they let me out after 4 years for good behavior instead of the 8 years they gave me. When I got out, I couldn't get enough air. Well, I thought my torment was over, but it turned out not at all. The most interesting thing was still waiting for me. I started running around to former friends, acquaintances, trying to start my life from scratch. You know, when you are no longer the son of a businessman, but a convict, your friends suddenly forget you exist. I realize that I just don't have any. How frustrating it is when those who fed off your hand now turn away, not even hiding their squeamishness. My stepmother had managed, along with Harry, to squander all my father's possessions, and she had heard from friends that I had been released on parole and decided to get rid of me. She hired some thugs, and that's who I ran into in the alley. But prison taught me a lot, including how to stand up for myself. They didn't succeed. I fought back, broke free, and escaped, and then you picked me up on the road. But that was not all. That evening, because all the surgeons on duty were busy, it was decided to involve the head physician of the hospital, Henry Collin. And he didn't hesitate to examine a tramp with a criminal record. I'm very grateful to him. And when he saw me, he almost fainted. He pulled his wig off his head and wiped the sweat from his forehead with it. David, alive. Oh my God, where the hell have you been, son? I haven't seen you since your father's funeral. I remember him all the time. He was a golden man. He was a golden man. He did so much for the department, bought expensive imported equipment. We were friends for so many years. My God, what happened to you? Why do you look like that? Tell me everything at once. While he was stitching me up and treating my wounds, I briefly told him all about my stepmother and her shenanigans, and about the drug setup, and about the drug setup, and about jail. He was shocked. He promised to help me, and he kept his word. Moreover, he took me in for a while. He used his connections and helped me get out of everything. I filed a police report for assault. The thugs were detained, and they turned in their stepmother as the orderer. The police got there in time. The scoundrels were already on their way out of the house with their suitcases. My stepmother, realizing that the attempt on my life had failed, decided to get out of town and sit out overseas. They got her and Harry, too, and now they're under investigation. Let them feel what it's like to be in prison resort. At the interrogation, my son immediately ratted out his mother and told the staff not only about the attack on me, but also about the murder of my husband. The investigator promised to review my case. If I was lucky, they might even rehabilitate me. But the most important thing, my father turned out to have left a card in a bank vault. It has most of the money from his income. It's a huge amount. Only I have access to it. That is, he foresaw that his competitors can arrange a provocation or an attempt on his life, and decided to ensure my future in that way. Only his best friend, Henry Collin, knew about this card. He didn't even know I was in jail, for it all happened very quickly. My stepmother had done her best, and she told him I'd gone up north to work and disappeared. He never wanted to see me alive again. He cried and begged my forgiveness that I had been suffering for so many years, and he had done nothing to help. But he really didn't know. Henry Collin and I went to the bank and activated that very card, and now I'm no longer a bum or a vagrant, but a well-to-do citizen. So there you go. It turns out that miracles do happen in this life. I'm so grateful to my father for taking care of me, and to the surgeon for giving me a shoulder to lean on at the most difficult moment, and to you, my savior, for not letting a complete stranger die. Allison was shocked. She just shook her head and wondered about everything, then asked, "It's unbelievable, of course." "I can't believe it," Oh my God, what are you going to do now? What are you going to start? You've got all these opportunities to change your life. The guy smiled. I'll start by helping you. It's a matter of honor for me. I was at your place of work and the guys at the garage told me that the bastard owner kicked you out because of me. But we'll fix that real quick. I'll just buy the pizza chain and start developing it in my own way. And I'll put you in charge. How's that sound? Allison choked on her tea and coughed. Are you serious? Are you serious? Of course I'm all for it. I don't like a lot of things there. Neil Morrison is too greedy. He doesn't want to invest in development, learn new technologies, and improve the quality of service. It's not right. Personally, I would reconsider a lot of things, and especially the fleet. It's just a piece of junk. You can't even drive it. Thank you for the flattering offer. It's just that I'm scared. I've never been a manager before. What if I can't do it? I'll let you down. David cheered her up. It's going to be okay. I'm still a beginner too. I just learned. So we'll start everything from scratch and together. I'll hire you a competent assistant. I have a good woman in mind. She'll help you, and then maybe you'll go to school. You know, Allison, it's been easy for me to be with you from the first minute. I don't know why. I think we're going to get along. So I'd love it if you'd take me up on my offer. The woman rejoiced. I'd love to take it. I'm on the verge of despair. I am a week overdue on my rent, and I haven't sent my son or parents anything. And as luck would have it, I can't get a proper job. I cried my eyes out. The guy was taken aback. Do you have a son? Wow, you look so young, don't you? What's your name? How old? Why isn't he with you? Where's your husband? Inundated her with questions, a surprised David. Allison answered honestly. I got divorced from my husband 2 years ago. We got married too early because I was pregnant, and he didn't really want a baby. When Andy was born, he didn't even pick him up, and he wasn't involved in raising him in any way. Everything fell on me alone. My mother-in-law nagged me day and night. My husband went on a bender, and I was torn between laundry, cleaning, and the baby, sleeping literally 2 hours a night. And in the end, I could not stand it. I spat on everything and left. We separated. But even after the divorce, my ex does not help my son. He pays a penny alimony, and that's it. To live with his parents and son in the village makes no sense. You know, there is no work there from the word completely. So I had to leave my son for his parents and go to the capital. I cannot always sit on their necks. I miss Andy terribly, and I wish I could get him here soon. But so far, as you can see, the room is tiny. There are no conveniences, and they kicked me out of work too. David listened attentively and thoughtfully, and did not interrupt. Then he said quietly, I hear you. But it's not normal for a child to grow up without his mother. I have a mother who died early, and I know how bad and nauseating it is without her. And no one in the world can replace her. You know what? Here's the money. Take it and don't refuse, or I'll be very offended. Go home and visit your family and your son. I'll take care of everything, and then I'll come and get you. I'll pick you both up. It's the least I can do for you. You didn't think twice about putting a wounded convict in your car and taking him to save his life. So let me thank you from the bottom of my heart. Allison was shocked and babbled. Thank you, David. Don't think. I'll work it all off, down to the cent. Then I'll go pack. I'll be able to see my son and Mommy tomorrow. Here's my address in the village and my phone number. We'll be waiting for you. They said a warm goodbye. Allison bought her son some new clothes and toys and sweets, and she didn't forget about her parents. She bought her mother a new comforter because the old one was worn out. And her father some rubber boots, because the roads there were so rugged. And I went home having paid the landlady in advance. Little Andy, seeing his mother coming from a distance, rushed down the street to meet her with a shout of joy. He jumped up and down on her neck, hugged her so hard it hurt, and kissed her, kissing her, wailing, "Hooray, Mommy's here. I missed you so much. Don't go away again, please. I want to be with you, okay?" Allison sobbed too, clutching her dearest chubby treasure to her heart, and promised him, "All right, my darling bunny. I'll take you with me. I missed you too very much. I love you so much. You're the dearest thing I have. We will never be parted again, I promise." My mother ran out to the noise and started hugging her daughter too. "Allison, sweetheart, you're here. Oh, we're so happy." And Andy's been so exhausted. He's been crying. He doesn't want anything. He wants his mommy. Come inside. Dad, your motorcycle. Get in here. I'm so glad Allison's here. The woman felt so good and warm at heart that she was so welcome at home, so welcomed and loved. Then everyone ate dinner, looked at the presents, tried on the new clothes, and Allison gushing to my mother about her new acquaintance, David. She just shook her head in amazement. She spluttered, "It's just like in the movies. I can't believe it. What a fate. You never know what's waiting for you around the corner." My father became very worried. "You've got to be kidding me, Allison. You've known him for less than a week, and you believe all these stories, and you're taking Andy with you. You said you were a former jailbird. You never know what's on your mind. You women are so gullible. When he gets here, we'll see what kind of fruit he is. They're all good at telling fairy tales and promising the world, but when it comes to business, they just want to run away into the bushes." There was some truth in her father's words, and Allison herself could not yet fully believe that this was not a dream, and she was very afraid of betrayal or meanness again. What if he lied and wouldn't come back for them? And she had already promised her son. I felt sad. My mood was gone at once. But she didn't let it show, so as not to upset her son and parents, and answered cheerfully, "We'll see." But for some reason I believed him. His eyes were so, I don't even know how to say it, honest or something. I feel he's not lying. Well, cannot all be scoundrels. The week flew by like a day, and still no word from David, worrying about his son and helping his family. Allison was beginning to worry, and decided that her father was right, and that the rescued convict was just a chatterbox. Another week went by, then another. Andy, of course, was happy to have his mommy around, glad she'd been home so long. The woman, on the other hand, was all torn up and didn't know what to do next. How to live. What to do. Say goodbye to her son again and lie to him that she wouldn't be gone for long? The parents understood their daughter's condition. They did not pry into her soul, but rather tried to distract her from her sad thoughts with various tasks and concerns. But the young mother realized that she could not go on like this for long. The money David had given her had run out long ago, and she needed something to live on. Apparently, she would have to start all over again by herself. That thought alone made me feel sick and unbearable. Suddenly, a huge jeep pulled up in the yard. David got out of it, carrying flowers in huge bags. A joyful Allison ran to open the door. Her heart was racing, and everything inside was singing and rejoicing. He didn't let me down. He hadn't abandoned her. Didn't forget. He's here. David was directly enamored, looking at the woman of natural beauty. Said hello, and began to make excuses. "Hello, Allison. Sorry it took so long, but it solved everything. I was very reluctant to sell the business, but in the end my greed got the better of me. I bought myself a 2-bedroom apartment in the center, and you and your son, too, next door. Do you mind? It's a quiet place, in a residential neighborhood. There's a kindergarten and a school, a playground for kids. I think you'll like it. You don't want to be stuck in a squat, so you can move in. Come on, let's go introduce me to my son and my family." Allison just fluttered her eyes and caught the air with her mouth. "How did you buy us an apartment? That's a lot of money. Mind you, I'll pay it back to you little by little like a mortgage. You can't do that. I don't feel comfortable. It's not like we're just friends. Or are we? "Oh my God, my head is spinning." David laughed, kissed her on the cheek, and replied, "Come on. Everybody's comfortable. Then we'll figure out who owes what to whom." Allison introduced David to his parents and to Andy. The baby was very happy to see him, happily playing with the gun he had given him and chattering away. He showed David his drawings and clay art. Then everyone sat down to dinner. Allison and Mom tried their best and set a generous table. David ate with a wolfish appetite and kept praising the treats. Allison was flushed with compliments. She was very pleased with David's warm words. When the feast was nearing its end, my father poured another shot of sweet blackthorn and said, "So, that's the last one. And shall we go for a smoke, David? I need to talk to you about something without the ladies hearing." And he gave the boy a conspiratorial wink. Allison tensed up. She remembered perfectly well how her father's negotiations with Matthew had ended once. She began, "Dad, don't. David and I were just..." But David reassured her, "It's okay, we'll talk about our own things, like men, and then we'll come. We can have our own secrets, can't we?" The men went outside and smoked some strong tobacco. Allison's father began, "David, tell me honestly, what do you want from Allison? I'll never believe you're just being friendly. That's not how it works. I've lived my life. I know what's going on. You like her, don't you?" The guy answered honestly, "I won't lie. I'm not used to it. Yes, I like your daughter very much. I've never met such sincere and kind people. But I've been in jail, though I'm not guilty of anything. Would she want to go out with an ex? Can't? I don't know. But I really wanted to live together and raise Andy and protect them." The elderly man said, "It's just that my daughter was very badly burned once. She suffered for a very long time. It was heartbreaking to look at her. So I'm begging you, David, don't hurt her again. And don't hurt her again. And don't hurt your grandson either. They are the dearest people to my mother and me, and I just couldn't bear it if something bad happened to Allison. Promise me, and don't hurt your grandson. He's a good boy. He's kind. So if you're not sure you can love them as your own, you'd better not tame them." David responded earnestly, "I promise. I won't hurt Allison or Andy, and I'll do everything I can to make them happy. I won't let you down." Allison put her son to bed, and the parents went to bed, but the young people couldn't sleep. He and David sat on the bench in the gazebo and couldn't get enough of talking. They both felt so good and easy, so warm together, as if they had known each other half their lives. When it was almost dawn, Allison whispered, "Okay, it's time to go to bed. I've got to sleep it off before I go on my way. My naughty boy will be up soon, and my mother hasn't even gone to bed yet. I made a bed for you in the back room. Good night." David gently and timidly took her hand and kissed it gently. "Allison, I like you a lot, but I'm not going to push you. I just want you to know that. Whether we're together or not, I'll keep you and your son safe, and I won't let anyone hurt you." And he kissed her gently on the cheek goodnight. That innocent kiss made Allison's cheek burn all night, and she was spinning and unable to sleep. The whole thing seemed like a fairy tale about Cinderella and Prince Charming, and she was afraid that at exactly 12 o'clock in the morning everything would disappear and the carriage would turn into a pumpkin. From that day on, the woman's life began to change, as if in a fairy tale. The first thing David did was to give her the keys to the apartment, and she and her son began to settle in. The man helped to get the baby into kindergarten, which is not easy to do in the capital, and they began to run their own business together. The work started boiling over. Allison expertly chose new, small, maneuverable cars for pizza delivery, and David was casting chefs and selecting the best people. It took a month of painstaking work and preparation, changed the style and design, and now they were open. David didn't graduate in business and management for nothing. He miscalculated everything, and the work went on, spun. The common business and concern for Andy brought the couple together so much that they couldn't imagine even a minute without each other. They had a strange relationship, a mixture of strong, sincere friendship, trust, and a smoldering spark that both did not let ignite yet. Their apartments were close to each other, and they went back and forth without end, no longer feeling the difference between home and away. David quickly found common ground with the baby, and they became friends and enjoyed playing together, modeling plasticine, and playing ball in the park. One day, on her day off, Allison took her son to his grandmother's. They missed her very much, and she came home very late. She noticed from afar that the light was still on in David's apartment. She didn't want to go home. It was empty and sad without her son. So she decided to drop in on David for a cup of tea. She would discuss plans for Monday at the same time. They were to go shopping in person. Allison yanked on the door, which was unlocked, and stepped in quietly. She thought she heard someone sobbing in the bedroom. She was already running in, and she saw the sad scene. David was sitting right on the carpet on the floor, a family album on his lap and a glass of cognac in his hands. He was stroking a picture of his mother, his father, and sobbing softly, very childishly. Allison became uncomfortable, and she also asked quietly, "David, I'm sorry. This must be a bad time. Do you want to be alone? I'm sorry, I'll go now." The man woke up, immediately wiped away a stingy tear, and waved her off. "No, Allison. It's okay. Have a seat next to me. I could use the company right now. Can I get you some? It's Mom's birthday. Let's remember her. May she rest in peace. It's a day I'm especially sad. So many years have passed and I miss her. Here, look at this. How beautiful she was. She even resembled you in some way. You know, I remember how she used to put me to bed and tell me a story about a polar bear. She used to ruffle my hair and stroke my cheeks. The warmth of her hands is still in my heart." They sat for a long time. David told about his childhood, funny and ridiculously frank moments. They laughed and cried together. Then suddenly he turned to her and said, looking straight into her eyes, "Oh, honestly, Allison, you don't like me as a man at all, do you? It seems to me that you don't pay any attention to me and I'm just a friend to you, nothing more. And I'm dying inside of my love for you. Can't you feel it? And Andy's no stranger to me anymore. When he sits on my lap, it feels so good inside, so warm." Allison didn't say anything, but kissed him passionately. It was more sincere than any words. David could not believe his happiness and began to cover the whole body of his beloved with kisses, unable to hold back any longer, and they swirled in a whirlpool of passion. Every cell of Allison felt how he wanted her, how sincere his impulses were. Matthew had never shown such deep feelings for her. That's how they became a strong, real, loving family. They decided to demolish the partition wall and merge the apartments, making one more spacious. The couple married modestly. They both didn't want any extra pomp and attention. Allison, of all people, knew now that a wedding solves nothing, and true happiness should be quiet. The parents couldn't be happy to have a son-in-law. Finally, their daughter and grandson were secure. They watched their daughter's eyes light up with happiness, and Andy gradually began to call David Daddy himself. One day, the newlyweds came to the village to visit their parents, and the whole family went to the lake for a swim. David spread a blanket, inflated an air mattress for Andy, and they frolicked and played in the water like little children. Then David began to teach the baby how to swim. He supported him from underneath in the water and said, "Well, son, come on. Together with Daddy. Like a frog, do it with your feet and rake away the water with your hands." Soon the baby was doing very well, and he squealed happily. "Folder, look, I did it. I'm swimming on my own. Aren't I good?" Allison smiled as she put her face in the summer sun and called out to her men, "Come on. Let's go back to my place and get warm. I already made sandwiches." "Sonny, you've been driving Daddy crazy. We need to rest a little and sunbathe. Otherwise you'll get sick. and we have to go to kindergarten on Monday. Nearby, in the shade under a willow tree, a group of men were drinking alcohol. They were local fringe people. One of them, intently observing the happy family vacation, suddenly clutched a plastic glass until it crunched and threw it into the water. His face contorted into a grimace of rage. It was Matthew. He recognized Allison, of course, for she hadn't changed a bit in all that time. And the chubby, rosy-cheeked boy who'd called the strange man Daddy was his own son. How could it be? Was that strange man closer to him than his own father? It wasn't fair. His first impulse was to go over there and make a scandal. He wanted desperately to punch Allison's companion in the face and prove to her that he, Matthew, should be the one right there with them. It made his fists itch. But then the ex-husband realized what exactly was he going to say to his son? Hello, am I your real father who never visited you once? The one who walked left and right and never even took you in his arms. He probably doesn't even remember me anymore. He's just scared. Only now the man realized how stupid and ridiculous he had squandered his family, exchanging it for friends and one-time girls. And what did he end up doing? So he wandered through life like a loner, with no profession, no beloved woman, no children. He couldn't bear to watch that lucky man smearing sunscreen on the back of his once-beloved woman, how he carefully wrapped a towel around and fed little Andy, holding him close to him, and Allison. She looked so content and happy, just glowing. That's it, men. I gotta go. I'm going home. The train's coming. They were perplexed. What are you doing? We haven't even had half of it yet, have we? Where are you going? Weren't you supposed to go tomorrow? He just waved his hand and staggered back to his aunt's house. David was completely rehabilitated, and his criminal record was expunged. He ordered and erected a good-quality monument on his father's grave with the inscription, "Thank you, Daddy," and bowed down. Now, he and his family often visited his family's grave sites, visiting, caring for them, telling them everything. David felt so much better, as if his parents could hear him up there in heaven and be happy for their son. Allison never once regretted that she had so blindly believed in the simple tramp and helped him. And in the end, she had found the best and most loving husband and responsible father. And David still loved his sweet Allison. She was the meaning of his life. The couple began to think, why not give birth to a brother or sister for Andy? We hope it works out for them, because they really deserve it. Our life consists of sorrows and joys. It is sometimes unpredictable, but the main thing in it is always to remain human and not to lose heart. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.